Howdy, Naughty here. And like with some of my more recent videos, we are going to do things a little differently today. Per popular demand amongst some of my friends, as naturally I don't think I have the requisite amount of fans to make such demands, I am going to throw my hat in a new ring and sorry, I misspoke. And I'm going to try reviewing a comic. Not just any comic, however. Specifically, the comic of one Blacklight Jack, a YouTuber who has built his career off of criticizing the comics of others. And I won't be criticizing his comic because, reviews scary and bad. I actually quite like most of his content. Some of the hypocritical aspects aside, of course. Now, when I review his comic, one of the biggest things that will stir across my mind will be whether or not he knows the basics, the fundamentals, what it takes to actually create a story and let your audience live in it. Because anyone can make a comic by technicality, and anyone can criticize if they know the fundamentals. So let's see how well Jack can exercise said fundamentals. Now, naturally, in the event that someone from Jack's server, or perhaps Jack himself, finds my video, I will already be acutely aware that there are sections of the comic, specifically in Chapter 3, that as of this time, have not been posted to Webtoon yet. These portions of the comic will simply not be reviewed, solely because, or if not partially because, I found that the comic does get better as it goes. And also because I will choose to respect the privacy of this creation. Now, naturally, later on, I will delve into what I find wrong with the segment. However, I will try to do so in a way that does not breach spoiler territory. That way, when they are released, the public, or those who may have simply watched my video, may still find some enjoyment in reading something new and unknown. As I can definitely recommend reading this comic. It gets better as it goes, and despite a few fundamental flaws, I'd say it's worth a read, especially if you like little unknown things. Now, the way this will go is I have read this comic a few days ago. Naturally, some things might take me a minute to recall, and I will not be scripting this video, as if I do, then I'm not sure this video will ever see the light of day, as something about writing scripts, etc. and so forth. So I will show screenshots that I've made during my read, and I will, if I recall, attempt to explain why I screenshot this portion. Now, naturally, spoilers ahead for what has been released publicly. This is your final call to read the comic. The first page I shall be showing is an introductory one. It is a page that shows the fighters stepping in and being introduced by the announcer. In our right, we have new up-and-comer with 5 wins and 0 losses, Larian! A thought bubble suggesting, who is this guy? On our left, we have a complete mystery opponent. We don't know who he is, but he asked for the duel and paid the fees, so we aren't questioning it. Do you see it? Did you spot it? The reason I circled that dialogue bubble. It's because, simply put, as you will find later on, this comic has a bit of an exposition problem. Now, there's nothing technically wrong with that statement as far as I'm aware. Please do keep in mind I am not a professional critic. However, the statement itself says too much, in my opinion. If you must say that it's a mystery opponent, then please state that he has not fought yet, instead of saying we don't know who he is. Yes, no duh. He is a mystery. It's not a mystery if you know who it is. Up next, it is announced the death waiver has been signed, so without further ado, let's begin. Nothing wrong with the statement, I just have the whole page here, so I may as well read it. Now up next, naturally I skip a few segments, and we get to the beginning of the fight. An attack was swung and a miss, but technically I think it simply didn't work out. Whatever the case, it goes. Ha! So you overwhelm your opponents with quick strikes, then use your artifact to finish the job. What a poor strategy. Should I have expected you, city folk, to be weak? Now, and speaking of now, there's quite a bit here. Well, I suppose not really. I circled the portion of dialogue that says, so you overwhelm, etc. and so forth. And I circled that because, as the audience, we just saw this. You've no need to explain what just happened, as the art itself did a serviceable job of demonstrating this. The comic needs to learn to show and not tell. Now granted, this is within the first few pages of what's released, so naturally there are going to be some hiccups, but I just wanted to point out that if you're showing something, you don't need to treat the audience like they're a bunch of 5-year-olds. I can see that this comic's clearly been inspired by a lot of anime, and so I will personally chalk it up to an issue with anime and how it, as a genre, has an exposition problem, and how that exposition problem has littered and ruined a lot of media. Up next, the next page that I will be demonstrating is during their first explanation of the magic system. In my opinion, it is quite serviceable and does decently well to explain everything that the audience needs to know at this point. The way that they get to it is a bit although in his shoes I'm not too sure I'd have done differently. Now, the reason I'm showing this page if the explanation is serviceable is because it's a little redundant. The main character, Gjarn, says, "My turn," while the child explains that the next portion to explain is markings, an inborn signature arcane ability unique to every different owner based on their fur patterns and family ancestry. When the eyes glow with energy, they're about to be used. Now, the reason I have circled this portion is because wording. Every different owner. Can you see what's wrong with that statement? I suppose it could be chalked up to a simple grammatical mistake, but please, in the future, don't say every different. If you're saying that it's unique to every owner, then you can simply say unique to every owner. Mistakes like this tend to make the dialogue lengthy and overworded. This is not a high school essay. You do not need to make such mistakes. The next box I circle is when the eyes glow with energy they're about to be used. This is another one that I will blame on anime over Jack's lack of knowledge on the basics and fundamentals, as I'm sure Jack knows the basics and the fundamentals. This is simply exposition and over-explaining of the magic system, in my opinion, because the audience, we are adults if we see this comic, and if we're seeing this comic and we're not adults, well, in most cases I think even a teenager or an older child can deduce what happens when the eyes glow, as in most forms of media and in most cases, when you see eyes glow, what do you think that means? Go on, I will give you a second. That's right, when the eyes glow, the ability is going to be used. So I'm not sure why that needed an explanation outside of it's what anime has done or it's what media does. The next page that I shall be demonstrating is them explaining the world. It's serviceable. However, this section says that land is Fenrock, while demonstrating a continent, quite sizable, labeled Fenrock. In my personal opinion, instead of the redundancy that would be labeling the continent Fenrock for this page, I would have probably taken the opportunity to demonstrate how the country divvies up its states and cities, if you can, as showing the geological infrastructure, maybe the map layout. That is better than Fenrock when you're explaining that it is Fenrock. Thusly why I also wrote on my screenshot, thusly why I put on the screenshot, you don't say. Now, the next page that I have taken a screenshot of and should be showing at this point will be one that says, or one that is explaining why northerners or people in Fenrock that are from the north are seen as hostile savages that know nothing better than blood, war, pillaging, and all things in between. The art itself is quite serviceable and does a pretty good job of showing what exactly gets them seen as such savages. Now, the reason I've screenshotted this page is because of what it says. They pillaged and slaughtered everything that moved and burned down everything that didn't. The art shows this. I'm not sure it needs an explanation. While a 5-year-old might see the art and not comprehend what it is showing, this comic is not for 5-year-olds. Please keep that in mind as you progress and as you make comics. Showing is often all you need to do. Not always. Telling does have its parts, which is why I did not screenshot every portion of this comic. Now let's see. Oh, this next portion gets back to that explanation of the various continents and at least Fenrock and what its deal is. As a result of the conflicting ideologies, the country is in a state of civil war between raiders trying to uphold tradition and innocents seeking advancement. Now, this explanation is quite a good hook and something that is good for world building. World building that has otherwise been generally lacking, which I will explain later. Obviously, no northerner should cross the border of the Civil War South. Yes, it is obvious. I do not think this text box was needed. It simply restates what an audience person might know. The average person might not notice and might just think it's a neat detail. However, most people that are more critical might dislike this sort of thing and think that you're treating them like a 5-year-old. Alright, and the next page that I'm screenshotting this time is not for exposition's sake and the crime that it's been thus far. Instead, it's to demonstrate this man be thick. Jack obviously does not know how to draw different body types, and Jack, if you're listening and watching, oh my goodness, 15 minutes, I suggest that you please study anatomy, learn how things and parts of the body flow, why they flow that way, and generally, how to draw fat people. This character, before and after this image, has been shown, or at least will be shown, to be of the more fat variety, which you can tell in the way that his stomach is drawn. However, the reason you want to learn anatomy is because one lesson in anatomy is all it takes to go from hourglass figure to oh my gosh figure. I just think this is funny. Look how thick he be, boy. Oh my goodness. Okay. Up next. Oh, right, this portion. The screenshot that I should be showing now would be, "Are you sure you know the path?" asked by Gjarn to the child. Of course I do. I sneak into this arena all the time to watch duels. Don't tell the boss I said that, by the way. The reason I've circled this bubble and the portion, and the portion specifically in said bubble is because it has been explained before, and it will be explained multiple times that this child has snuck through. At this point, the audience already knows, and Gjarn already knows. There is no point in the child explaining, "I sneak into this arena all the time to watch duels." Especially since, oh goodness, it's been a few days since I read this. Don't tell boss I said that, by the way. I think the boss already knows. He might not have said that he knows in front of the child, but either way, I'm sure there's a better way to go about this portion, and that's pretty much what it boils down to for a lot of it. There's generally a better way to go about it. Oh goodness, this next screenshot. The reason these next screenshots are going to be so close together if you read the comic is because I have a big problem with his second explanation of the magic system. And I will explain as I go. Speaking of which, since I'm your manager, it's time I explain the basics of Arcana to you from this book. Next screenshot. What? I obviously already know. Next screenshot. According to Chapter 1 of the Foundations of Arcane. Do you see the problem here? Now, generally, there are fine ways to do a second explanation if a second explanation must be done. However, that's only if there are large renditions, in my opinion, or large changes or things that have not been seen. What's about to take place are things that for the most part have been shown, and in the future will be shown. I'm not sure this second explanation is in any way necessary. And the fact that he calls this out during the dialogue just tells me that he knows a second explanation is not necessary, and yet he does it anyway. Or at least that he knows this is a trope and not a good one. Actually, he might not know that it's not a good one. Well, Jack, if you're listening, it's not a good one. In all life, big and small, contains a great, ancient, and magical energy that flows through all of our bodies as a result of arcane-infused biological evolution. Do you see the problem here? In my opinion, you should let magic be magic. Drop the arcane-infused biological evolution, or at least everything during and after as a result, and it would be fine, it would be serviceable. It could even be a lore-based dump of how it came up at this point. that's not how it will go, but let's see. Boy, I said I already know, and then he's cut off. Shh, ahem. Nearly all creatures have markings, be them as small as a birthmark or large as a torso of spots. I screenshot this page and circled this box because, in my opinion, if you are going to explain markings, then you did not need to do so earlier. If you need to have a more in-depth explanation, then skip the first one or make the first one more in-depth. Goodness gracious. Relics are items with... Oh, next page, by the way. Relics are items with magical properties that come in many shapes and sizes. The more powerful, useful a relic's ability is, the more arcana it uses to activate. This was explained earlier, not exactly like this, but this was explained and shown earlier by re-explaining and not really showing beyond a couple of images. You're just kind of slogging this section through. It feels obligatory, like you think you have to do this. Jack, you don't have to do this. Next page. Oh, consuming all of your arcana results in a body-stifling fatigue. It has been coined arcane exhaustion by warriors from generations past. This is likely some level of foreshadowing, as at some point either main character or an opponent will go through arcane fatigue and overexert themselves. In my opinion, the best way to go about this specific portion of the explanation would have been to skip the second explanation entirely and instead have the original opponent that Gjarn went up against overexert himself and go through arcane exhaustion. By doing so, you're not just showing more of your magic system during the initial fight, but showing how easy it can be to overstep the boundaries of exhaustion and overexert to, to consume all of your arcana and go through that body-stifling fatigue. I think that would have been a great thing to show. Up next, let's see. Oh, right, so this screenshot I didn't even bother to circle anything. Indication of when this happens is when your body simply can't move, and sorry about that, and arcana billows from your mouth. As complex as some may consider it, it is simple in execution. In my opinion, it is, in fact, quite simple, and you do not need these boxes of text. Because what do you think fatigue means? Fatigue is a point of exhaustion in which your body cannot move, if not simply cannot move very well. And arcana billows from your mouth? You mean like these images are showing? Pardon me, I almost lost my cool. Simply put, I do not like the second explanation. It is over-wordy, says too much, and shows too little. And when I say shows too little, I mean it has visual aspects to it. It has images that come with the explanation. However, the explanation is really best suited for a fight or a demonstration from the author. Jack, in the future, please demonstrate these things as you explain in some way. As an explanation with mere images is just kind of boring. Especially, oh my goodness, especially with the dialogue. I will get into the dialogue later when I finished showing my screenshots. Now for the next page. I know, Pop. Like I'd believe you. What do your markings do anyway? My markings create weaknesses in nearly any surface I touch. I usually use it with my free hand. Needs. I think I know some relics that could help you with that. I am not touching one of your sorry little trinkets. Paralyzing a warrior, not as tools. Knew you'd say some shit like that. I'll talk about this later with the boss. Now, the reason that I've shown this page is almost exclusively because he's aware of this trope. And that means he should be aware, and if not, I'm going to make him aware right here, that the trope is not a good one. It adds time that is not necessary and treats the audience like they're children, when this story is meant for adults, people that can comprehend and think on their own. Now, I know that a lot of your fan base has said that your comic is great, and I don't think I've seen people pointing out flaws. And if anyone has, do correct me so that I may know. But in the meantime, that's one of the reasons I'm making this video. It's so I can get this out there and make my own thoughts known, whether or not you see it. I'm going to go ahead and move on with the next page. Yarn, fighters from Sorel are especially dangerous if you've never seen their swordplay tricks before. Also, that blade she has is a relic, and our reward if we win. It's called the Lashing Fang, and I'm going to stop there. Do you see the issue? Naturally, I'm sure you do. I've hammered it in for something like the past 16 minutes, I think. The dialogue says too much. Our reward if we win. Yes, we're aware that was discussed in detail earlier. That was a portion that I did not screenshot, by the way, because I thought it was quite serviceable. I'm going to go ahead and see about showing the next screenshot. Oh, this one. So the reason I'm going to show this screenshot is because the announcer has just introduced the fighters to one another, and she's sniffing the air, and she then declares, "Okay, you two are clean, no poisons on either of you. Now take 5 paces backwards and bare your blades and fangs." Now, generally this might say something about the arena itself and the rules of the deathmatch and the honor that comes with it. However, in my opinion, it doesn't. It tells me that in a place in which you're supposed to kill your opponent, or perhaps lead your opponent to a state of near death, and make them yield, as Gjarn did earlier, both are suitable options. Poisons, venoms, things like that aren't allowed. I ask that because what's the point? In my opinion, if you have a character that uses these poisons or venoms, you could easily make that character crafty, sneaky, subtle. So what's with this arbitrary limitation here? No poisons. That's ridiculous. And pointless. The goal is to kill the opponent. Why does it matter how the opponent dies? This will be the last screenshot I show, as the next pages go into the fight between Gjarn and Squirrel Lady. And overall, the dialogue is fine. The choreography is okay. And naturally, there's nothing egregious to really show that would be entertaining. So, I shall go into my more broad issues at this point. Dialogue matters. It matters a lot. And when I say it matters, I don't just mean the words that you say, but the way they're said by characters matters. And the specific words picked for characters matters. Because how a character speaks tells you a lot about the character. And I'm shocked that Jack did not play with this. As every character talks the same in this. And that's a problem, because not every character is from the same place. Squirrel Woman is from one region. Gjarn, who is supposed to be seen as a savage, talks quite civilly and is from the north. And why does a child talk like an adult? I mean, I suppose that's not really much of an issue, as children sometimes talk like adults, but my point should be clear here. Dialogue should be picked more carefully than this. In your shoes, I would have probably made Gjarn use simpler speech. I would have probably made Gjarn talk less. Maybe not made him brutish, but definitely more cold. And I would have made the child use more exciting words, probably. I'm not sure. I'm in the process of creating my own comic, so maybe I'll run into this issue myself. Until then, I don't quite understand why you didn't play with dialogue more. Imagine having an issue with dialogue, not just in having too much of it, but in not having the right way of dialogue. Oh goodness, that was worded so weirdly. It's 4 a.m. in my defense. Now, on to the next portion. In my opinion, I think Jack's biggest weaknesses are world building and character dynamics. The reason I say that is because character dynamics are fine, but they're kind of bland. That's about all I really have to say with character dynamics. The fact that they're bland is an issue. Now onto the world building. The world building is downright atrocious most of the time, in my opinion. On top of the choice of dialogue, the choice of apparel for each character tells you next to nothing. Mostly because Gjarn's armor and the armor from the deer, as a great example actually, it's pretty close to the same. In fact, I only knew it was the armor of a northerner because a character pointed it out. There's nothing intricate about the deer's armor that makes what's supposed to be Gjarn's more brutish armor different. Now, they cover different spots, I guess? But overall, and then if you look in the background, a lot of the apparel appears to be modern, or simply mismatched. Just a hodgepodge of various ideas of what medieval people wore at various times, all put into one. A friend of mine pointed out before that one of the older women in the background seemed like an old lady just coming from the mall. And yeah, no, that's probably right. I'm not sure why you wouldn't play with the fashion of the world, and the fact that you didn't is an egregious mistake. It's confusing to me. I will say, this is one of those issues that gets better as it goes, because personally, Squirrel Woman has her own unique fashion, and I think it's quite serviceable, especially with the knives tied to her tail. I think when you see her apparel, you can tell quite a bit about her character. I will give this to Gjarn. If you see his apparel, you can at least get the bare minimum basics about his character. Those are the two exceptions to the rule. Fat Man, I can't remember the name of. And not because the characters themselves are boring, but because I'm simply bad with character names. In my opinion, nothing about his outfit says anything about him. And that goes for the child, the woman that they speak to in the commissary, and so on. Most people don't really have outfits that tell you anything about them. And that's a problem, in my opinion, because how you act and what you do is usually what determines how you dress. Do you care about how you look? Then you very critically pick pieces of your outfit. Do you not really care what people think? Then you're generally the kind of person that throws on a t-shirt and pajama bottoms and then goes to a Walmart. probably wears slippers there too. Either way, that's egregious, in my opinion. Horrid. Well, maybe not horrid, but it's a beginner mistake for someone who goes so heavily into criticism. And, goodness gracious, Jack, why are you committing these beginner mistakes despite knowing when you criticize other people's comics what's up and what's not up, what's good and what's bad? Especially with how harshly you criticize other people's comics, you'd think that you would know better than to commit these atrocious sins. I suppose the biggest sin of Jack's comic, in my opinion, is that it's utterly boring. The setting itself is one that's seen 1,000 times. The world politics you don't really get to see much of so far, granted. We are only a couple of chapters in. And overall, the magic system is fine, but nothing really says much of anything. It's all samey and boring, in my opinion, when compared to other comics. And even when standing on its own, the setting itself feels uninspired. It feels like every other medieval setting. And I think that's a crime. If you create a setting, especially if you put as much thought into it as I thought you did, then it shouldn't feel boring or bland. It's... Why would you do that, Jack? Oh, goodness gracious, look at that. This recording is going on 40 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and summarize the biggest brunts of the crux of my criticism here. The dialogue needs to be improved. The designs and world building need to be improved. And overall, the setting itself needs to have a step up in evolution. Overall, the comic is fine, although be it boring. So, if I were to rate it, I would probably give it maybe a 2, 2.5, maybe a 3 out of 5 at most. I know that's a wide range, but at the moment, my opinions are a bit wishy-washy. So, that is all. Duty calls. And I hope you sleep well.